the idea of being a professional server doesn't exist like it did 20, 30, 40 years ago. Give somebody what they want at a value, at a price they're willing to pay. That's it. That's business, right? And so that's what they want. We're going to give it to them. Rodman talks about the triangle offense in the restaurant and how, someone would sit there and someone would sit there and someone would sit there. Well, that was at Gibsons. They went there religiously after every home game for several seasons. And we would serve anything that anybody asked for. If we have the ingredients, we'll do it. If people start asking for it enough, it ends up on the menu. Right. So the menu expanded over time. Yeah.
Right. What's the tagline that
we say we treat our new customers like they're celebrities and a celebrity like their new customer. Right. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life was, let go 2,000 people by a Zoom call. If you don't get off on making other people happy and serving other people, this is not the industry for you. Like, it has to be personally fulfilling to make other people happy. We say in our company, you can screw up the food and save it with the service. But if you screw up the service, you lose a customer forever.
You're flying into Chicago for the weekend, and there are a few things that you absolutely must do. You're going to Wrigley Field. You're going to the Willis Tower. You're taking an architectural tour on the Chicago River, and you're having dinner at Gibsons Steakhouse. Trust me, I've been there. It's iconic. It's legendary. And here to talk all about it is CEO Steve Lombardo. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Executive Airspace Podcast. I am your host, John Traub, and we're delighted today to be joined by the CEO of Gibsons Hospitality Group, Steve Lombardo. Steve, welcome to the Executive Airspace Podcast.
John, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. And we have some food to dive into a little bit later. Thank you for bringing some of your menu our way to satisfy the stomach on a Monday.
That's what we do.
That's what you're known for sure. An iconic brand in Chicago since the late 80s. A lot I want to cover today as far as the culture, how you maintain the reputation, taking care of VIPs and regular customers as if they're the same. But maybe we start at the beginning. Tell us about the concept and how Gibsons came to be.
Sure. So my father, Steve Lombardo, he's actually a junior. I'm a third. So he goes by Steve 2. I'm Steve 3. He had a restaurant that pre-existed Gibsons on that site. He had been in the restaurant bar business, really going back to the very late 60s, early 70s. Was very successful in it with a number of his friends that he grew up with, who he got into the business with, and had a restaurant there called Sweetwater. The restaurant is a French-American restaurant, had been around since 1976, but the partnership that he had split up, and he ended up with that restaurant. This is probably in the early 80s, and he had about 4 kids, and the restaurant was, Chicago was not at its peak at that point. It was probably close to its bottom. But I got 4 kids. I got pay for college some way. This restaurant has kind of run its course, and I've got to come up with something.
Okay.
And so he goes on an R&D trip. And if you've ever done a restaurant R&D trip, I don't recommend them. You end up eating, about, twice your body weight over the course of 2 or 3 days.
I've never done that.
No. So he goes on a trip with Rich Melman from Let's Entertain You.
Yeah.
And they go in about 36 hours. They probably hit 25 different restaurants. And my father had seen the, Peter Luger's and Smith and Walensky and a number of the other sort of classic steakhouses. And at the time, it's hard to believe, but Chicago had 6 steakhouses in 1987, 88, before we opened. And today there's about 60 steakhouses. Really loved the idea, came back, took him 2 years to raise the money. People were not big believers in the idea. It was kind of health food, healthy concepts were the rage at that point in time. And they just went completely counter trend, gigantic steaks, gigantic martinis, gigantic desserts. And it's funny because Rich Melman actually helped design the bar. It's one of those little kind of funny Chicago restaurant trivia facts that he sketched out the bar on a napkin and gave it to
Oh,
my
that's great.
father. And so
Yeah.
they've been friendly competitors for 50,
Sure.
oh boy, 57 years. They both got in the business at the same time. So, so he opens up Gibson's, has to bring in a partner, a guy named Hugo Raleigh. Hugo was trained at the hotel and hospitality school in Lausanne, Switzerland, one of the top schools in the world for hospitality. And he was also the general manager of Tavern on the Green in New York in the late 70s, if you know that restaurant.
Sure.
It's been in a lot of movies like
Right.
Ghostbusters and Mr. Popper's Penguins and others. So he was the real operator, knew the nuts and bolts of both the kitchen and the operation. My father was the front of the house guy, the shake hands and kiss babies and the idea and concept guy. Um, and they what he would say is my father would say is the secret to their success was survival. They open up in 1989. Uh, Chicago literally is at its bottom point. And he Rich Daley gets elected. His inauguration is probably just a month or so after we open.
Mhm.
Changes the whole direction and trajectory of the city. Still takes years before the restaurant sort of gets a name for itself. But the survival was the big thing. My father would do whatever it took to make a customer happy. So that was really it. I mean, if someone came in and we weren't open yet, there's a true story. A couple of German tourists came in. They'd heard about the restaurant. We'd like to do it. It was 10 o'clock. We don't open till 11. Oh, well, let me go run in the back there and see, who's there. Yeah, the opening chef was there.
Right.
Whip something up and, we'll serve you.
Perfect.
People who had bad experience. I mean, there's not one, but there's dozens of stories of him chasing people out of the restaurant who waited too long for a table. When it did start getting a little more popular, I'm literally following them to their houses and begging them to come back.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
that sort of thing. There's even one story, and I'll tell it maybe later in the podcast. It's called the restraining order story. So
Okay.
that's a good, lead in.
Sounds
for it. Yeah,
interesting.
exactly. Exactly. But really, it was, hospitality, quality of food, quality of ingredients, the value, not trying to overcharge for people, giving them big portions, right?
Right.
And encouraging people to share. If, it's okay to buy a steak and split it between two people when some people, some restaurants would charge a plate fee,
Right.
right? So again, just different to what the times were. So that's he had been in the business a long time, so he'd known a little bit about how to get people in and that sort of thing. But it took a few years before, a- and it really was the just relentless execution, and it turned on some customers that really helped then explode it. One was Irv Cups in it, right?
Sure.
The people who wrote the gossip columnists in the newspapers, right? That was the social media of the day, right?
Right.
And then, the Bulls start winning in the early 90s. And
Right.
there was a season, actually, they talk about it in The Last Dance, and they don't mention the restaurant, but Rodman talks about the triangle offense in the restaurant and how,
Right.
someone would sit there and someone would sit there and someone would sit there. Well, that was at Gibson's. They
Mm-hmm.
went there religiously after every home game for several seasons. And so, you're talking with the playoffs, 50 plus days a year where they're not coming into the restaurant till 11:30 midnight.
Right.
And so now you have this whole extra seating of people going till 2 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And, Jordan would have the corner table in the window on Rush and Bellevue. So he, glass on both sides. So everyone could see him, but nobody could get
No
at
one could get
at
to him.
And
Right.
and they would know when the Bulls were in the night before because the busboys would have to clean the glass because there would be handprints, there'd be lipstick, there'd be all sorts of stuff.
Can only imagine, man.
Right, right. So, but that was how it started. Yeah.
So not only was the vision bold at that time to buck the trend
Yeah.
in dining, but the location
Yeah.
right across the street from the original Morton's,
Right.
fairly bold as well, I would imagine.
He sort of didn't have a choice because he had the restaurant that had been there
Right.
before, but, he was friends with Arnie, and he actually asked him for advice. Arnie helped, him in terms of, there were only a few the classic suppliers, Stockyards and Allen Brothers. I mean, he introduced them to the owner, the family, that owned the stock. Chicago, it was called U.S. Stockyards. They're now owned by U.S. Foods, and the introduced him. The guy's name was Harry Katz, and he took a liking to my father, and helped him learn about meat, and the rest is history.
Well, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great. So then Bulls are making their run. The restaurant is becoming on the map, becoming known as a destination.
yeah,
At that point, lessons being learned, modifying menus, modifying how did things change from when the doors first opened to maybe the first 5 years within that window? What kind of
Sure.
modifications were made?
That neighborhood, it's in the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is still a neighborhood. So even despite the issues in Chicago, there were still people that lived there and people of means that lived in the neighborhood.
Right.
And so they were our regular customer base, right? I mean, we get the conventioneers, we get the sports goers, you get the out of towners and that sort of thing, or people, making a night of it in the suburbs, but from the suburbs. But that was the loyal customer base were those locals. And so, a lot of them didn't cook for themselves. So they would just make a request and we would serve anything that anybody asked for. If we have the ingredients, we'll do it. If people start asking for it enough, it ends up on the menu.
Right.
So the menu expanded over time in a lot of ways to cater to the neighborhood.
Based on demand of
Exactly.
the people around. Wow, that's amazing.
Yep.
So when did your dad and the family and leadership understand that not only are we going to make it, but this is maybe something pretty special too?
Yeah. So I would argue my father still doesn't believe that. He's an entrepreneur who has, he's failed once, he's seen the bottom once. And so in his mind, everything dances precariously on the edge.
Right.
And every company does go through that, right? Where if the founder decides to quit the business dies, right? But at some point, whether it's through new people or systems or whatnot, you grow it to a size where it becomes takes on a life of its own. And I will tell you, my mother has two different stories because she worked in the business too when it first started. One was I was a freshman at Georgetown in Washington, D.C., and went to the Mortons that was in Georgetown. This is parents' weekend, freshman year of college. So the restaurant has been open all of 4 years.
Okay.
And a couple of guys are eating at the table next to us. And one of the guys says something, "Oh, I was just in Chicago. This place is good, but it's like not as good as this place, Gibsons." And my mother overheard, she's like, "Can you please repeat that?" And so, my father grabbed the waiter and picked up their tab. And, that's the other thing. Like, we'll do that and go, if we see customers of the restaurants, we'll just pay the bill. That's part of marketing.
Right.
Right. And then the other story she tells is then when an employee, a busboy, came up to her as a busboy, or maybe it was a line cook, came up to her and said, "Can I have some help with an application to buy my first house, like to get a loan and that sort of thing?" And so she's like, that was when I knew we were a success from the employee standpoint. So,
Wow.
which is really cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So let's touch on that for a moment. Staffing,
Yes.
a challenge in any industry.
Yes.
Certainly in the restaurant industry, another layer of challenges. But at your level, even adding on to that, tell me about that. How do you maintain the integrity of the staff to ensure that the experience from valet to valet is what it should be?
Yeah. So it's not easy. And, we don't succeed all the time. So in our industry, I think the turnover rate today is about 80%. It varies, depending on the market. I think as the economy contracts a little bit, or maybe it's not contracting, but I think right now we're in a tale of two economies. In the lower end of the spectrum, I mean, there's lesser opportunities for them for sure. And so you tend to have better turnover rates, right, in those periods. We're at about 50%. We tend to run about 50-60% of what the market is. I think that's a due part how we treat our employees. It's no doubt in part what we pay our employees. the folks who are tipped in our jobs, they make very, very good money. Many of them make over six figures. And so that's a big help.
Sure.
But it's not easy. I mean, even, the idea of being a professional server doesn't exist like it did 20, 30, 40 years ago. That's going to be your job for the rest of your life. We still have many of them. We still have, I think, about half a dozen day one employees.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. But the turnover rate that I described is a little misleading. It's not like we turn over half our staff every year. We probably turn over 20% of our staff several times during the year.
Right.
And some positions, dishwasher is a great example of something that it is hard. We may pay more above the market, but they come in and realize, oh my gosh, I'm doing twice as much work as I'm doing somewhere else for, a little more money. And it's more, but it's not, for some people, they'd rather not do that. And other people, the other side of it is we find there are people who love to work. And when you're busy for 8 hours in a row and it's just go, 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 the time goes like that. And some people love that. I'm one of those people. Right. And so, you'd rather be in a job like that than just standing around and waiting for something to happen. But not everyone thinks that way.
Well, but that, if it's not right, it's not right. And there's a certain type of personality and I think perspective and ethic that goes into the success. It's in your DNA.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we've done some things over the years. We now have, the application includes a personality test that is geared toward, what is successful in our business, depending on the position. And that's helped, things like that. But overall, it's, trying to hire right and treating people well when they're here and, the usual stuff.
Right. Right. So tell us about your journey. How did
Sure.
you get involved and what did that look like?
So grew up in the suburbs here in Chicago, actually close to O'Hare. I bussed tables when I was 14 years old. Was helping out the restaurant, various ways growing up. Sometimes it would be, the water heater would go down and it was Christmas. So guess where we were going to spend on Christmas, right? Trying to fix the boiler,
Right.
that sort of thing. And did some things. I was pretty computer savvy as a kid, and so created our first shelf to sheet inventory, way back then. But I was pretty well discouraged from going into business as a kid. My father worked 6 days a week around the clock, slept on Sundays. I tell this story. There were times in high school when my parents were working. When I got home at hours, I had no business getting away with something, and I would beat them home because they were working till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And that's just the way it went. So he actively discouraged it. I ended up going to law school. I practiced law for a number of years, actually almost 2 decades. In that period, I did represent the company. I helped them a lot with leases and fundraising and some occasional issues here and there. I also imported wine for over a dozen years as my night job. My father called me, the family lawyer, and said, we were opening up the restaurant Cortino and the concept revolves around good and expensive wine.
Right.
And he said, so we haven't been able to find any good expensive wine. I know it's out there. I've been to Europe. I know that you can get a euro, a bottle for €1 and it's just good drinkable stuff. And so he says, figure out how we do it. And I don't know anything about importing or the laws around it. And it's heavily, heavily regulated. All post-prohibition era stuff where we have what's called 3 tiers. You can either sell it retail, you can sell it wholesale or import wholesale, or you can make it, right? And never the twain shall meet except for limited exceptions. And so I did my research, told him that and said, it's totally illegal. You can't do it because you're in the retail side of business. I said, however, it appears that there are people, the end around in the common end around in this industry is people have trusted family members just hold a license. And he goes, okay, you got your first customer, go do it. And now I'm, working 60 to 70 hours a week as a lawyer. I've got 3 little kids. And so, yeah, why not just open up an import business. But
Why not?
we did, and did that for about a dozen years until I moved into the business. Then I couldn't.
Right.
I had to divest myself of that. So,
Right.
but what had happened, so I'd been involved advising the business. He and his partner, Hugo, the CFO, they were all the same age. So today they're 83, 84 years old. 20 years ago, they were 63, 64 years old. And I was advising them to start thinking about succession planning. And their answer was to work out more.
Oh, okay.
Like, oh, we're just not going to die. We'll
Yeah.
just keep working out.
Uh-huh.
And then they spent about 10 years working on the buy-sell agreement between them and trying to negotiate it based on their own, handicapping of who was going to die first.
Great.
So it wasn't, finally I was pushing my father and he said he felt like he needed the family to be involved in it, and take it over. My brother was already involved in the business. And so my sister, I think, no, she wasn't there yet, but now all four siblings are in the business. Probably some psychological component there of having a father who wasn't around that we all, ended up going to work for the business. But yeah, so practiced for law, doing private equity M&A for about 17 years, and then came in about 12 years ago.
Well, and if the family is bringing back certain perspectives or disciplines from other industries to make the
Yes.
company better, that's a win, right?
Yeah, and we've talked about that in terms of Gen 2 to Gen 3
Right.
succession and transition that, the kids can work in the business from an hourly standpoint. It's fine if they want to wash dishes or whatnot, but if they want to come into a management level position, they're working somewhere else for a while. And, it hasn't come up yet. Our kids are the first of that net generation are just coming out of college. And so, I don't think it's going to be an issue for some time, but we're
Okay.
planning for it.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to work out more. That's
No.
not right. I do need to, but not for that reason.
So speak to then coming into the company and then having structure, which it sounds like
Yeah.
was needed.
Yep.
And then the expansion.
Yeah.
Not only with the Gibsons name, but other names as well. I would imagine the average Gibson patron doesn't really know the scope of all the properties and entities that you're involved in.
Sure. So we've got Hugo's Frog Bar. There are 3 of those. We've got 3 Gibsons. We've got Gibson's Italia, Lux Bar. We've got a couple Cortinos. We've got, we operate RL Restaurant on behalf of Ralph Lauren.
Okay.
We opened up the Polo Bar in New York for them and ran it for really through COVID, and now they run it themselves.
Okay.
We opened up the Boathouse with the founder of Rainforest Cafe
Been there many times.
in Orlando at Disney, which I'm hoping this next year will be the top highest grossing independent restaurant in the United States.
You said something the other day about the number of turns you get down there. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it's 5 a day, 4 to 6, depending on, on the busiest day, we can do like New Year's Eve, we might do 7.
My gosh.
It's crazy. They're just, and people, you've got little kids, so they're, and that's the other thing. Families eat fast. They're in and out in 45, 50 minutes. They're not there for a 2-hour,
Right.
tasting menu.
Right. But a
Yeah.
great spot down there.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Thank you. And then we also have a joint venture with Jose Andres. So we operate Bizarre Meat and Bar Mar here in Chicago.
Right.
Yeah, great partnership. And then we've got Gibson's Tavern, which is going to be coming out in the West Loop. Call it 4 or 5 months. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then expansion, any other markets that you're considering at this point?
So yeah, we've been looking in, and here I'll step back. One of the things that, first of all, we have a lot of geographic and political, all our eggs in one basket. So diversifying out of Chicago, out of Illinois makes sense from that perspective. It also makes sense because if we've got 7, 8 restaurants that are within a square mile of each other. If we open another restaurant in downtown Chicago, we have to come up with a new concept. And that's
Right.
not saying we can't and don't, but it is harder to do. It costs more, it takes more time. To open up a Gibsons or any of our existing concepts is easier than, now there's challenges in going out of market, but
the equity is already there.
the brand equity is already there. Now, there are certain areas that the brand is much more well known. I mean, it is a national brand. People do know it. Although that being said, I will tell you there's a funny story about a guy in Glenview. You might know him. I won't say his name. Who's in the industry, he's tangentially in the industry, like food truck related.
Okay.
And I'd found out I didn't know him very well, but he mentioned he had gone to the restaurant show. I said, "Oh, I was there too." He said, "I'm in the business." And he goes, "Oh, what restaurants do you have?" And I said, "Gibsons Steakhouse." He goes, "Never heard of it." And I was kind of like, huh.
You're in the industry.
Yeah,
You've never heard of it?
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I don't assume people know it,
Right.
but in this case, I kind of did, and it sort of surprised me. So the point is that as much as I think we're, well known, you can't assume anything. But back to the markets that we are looking at, that Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona,
Absolutely.
Dallas, Texas, Florida, all over Florida, but Southwest Florida. I mentioned Naples
Right.
to you earlier. We've been looking there. East Coast of Florida as well. Outside of that, Nashville, the DC area. I've looked a lot in New York. We've operated in New York with respect to the Polo Bar, but won't do that right now with the person in charge there. It's too risky. But Vegas, there's enough low-hanging fruit there to last us for quite a while.
Yeah. So scaling the business,
Yeah.
without compromising the integrity or losing focus.
Yeah.
Talk about that balance.
So I'll tell a story about when I first came into the business. So we were about 100 million in sales when I started, which is no small thing. And, everything I've done, I like to say I stand on the shoulders of giants, right? We wouldn't be where we were, but for them, but we're at 100 million today. This year will be 260, 270, something like that. So we open up 3 restaurants in the span of a year and a half. And I just come into the company, and they were all management deals. They weren't owned. So we were getting paid a fee for them, but my father had set up the compensation structure for the senior tier of management that they were all receiving these fees. Fine. However, in this case, we literally went from 100 million in sales to 150 million sales, 1,000 employees to 1,500 employees in the span of 12 months. Everyone is running around with their hair on fire.
Yeah.
Everyone's pointing fingers. And it's blatantly obvious to me as the outsider coming in, but I've just started, and here I am, the founder's kid, the lawyer of all things, right? And everyone knows how everybody loves lawyers.
Everybody loves you, right?
Right. So I'm not going to be able to just come in and point finger or tell everybody what's wrong. But basically what had happened was we had grown the company by 50% and we had grown the back office by 0. We had spent not a single penny on infrastructure. And so, I had basically called our first strategic planning meeting, had an outside advisor to come to run the meeting. He interviewed everybody beforehand, and he starts at the beginning of the meeting. Well, there was some introductions, some other things, but he writes down a bunch of what I'll call symptoms on the board, and micromanagement, lack of communication, and just goes down the line. And he says, where'd I get this list from? And everyone says, well, you talked to us. I mean, this is obvious. This is everything we said. And he goes, he goes, this is out of a textbook. Every business hits a point where they hit an inflection point where, and we talked a little bit about this, founder-based business. If the founder dies, the business dies, right?
Right.
A people-based business where you've basically cloned yourself into a bunch of founder-like people, and then process-based. And you guys have to go to the process-based, and you're not there. And so that's, talking about scaling the business, that's what I've spent the last 10 years really doing is, attacking it one by one, because my father's not a process person. He's not a systems guy. And so how to build those things around him. And we've been doing that, and we're in a good spot right now. Not that there isn't more to do. There's always more to do, but
Right.
yeah.
So I would imagine the preservation of the brand, right? And how do you maintain the level of quality of service? What do you need to change? What haven't you changed? Are there some things maybe you've changed that have surprised you?
Yeah.
You talk about the menu and how that was a collaborative effort from the neighbors back at the beginning of the
Customer, yeah, the customer tells you what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this in orientation with new managers. It's just today. Uh, Business 101, give somebody what they want at a value, at a price they're willing to pay. That's it. That's business, right? And so that's what they want. We're going to give it to them. But to go back to the original question, yeah, I mean, it is, relentless training, creating an atmosphere that employees want to stay and work for you. So you have that institutional knowledge that lasts. Some of our differentiators over the years were knowing customers so well, and as a lot of it was trapped in people's heads. Technology today is such where that's become it starts evening the playing field because, everyone's got a reservation system and that's where notes are kept. And so, uh, you know, it's hard to be so much better than everyone else when, part of the specialness of us was we had someone who was here for 30 years and they knew what you liked, what you didn't like, what you were allergic to. They knew that if you sat down, you better have 2 fingers of Jack Daniel's neat before your butt hits the chair, right? So we still do that, right? But other people can do that too. How do you do it? It's relentless focus on it. It's just it never stops. They say you can't. People don't hear something until they've heard it 7 times. You have to say it 7 times for them to actually hear it.
Right.
Well, it's probably 70 or more. You just cut. We've got what are known as Hugoisms, and they're actually technical components of service, but there's philosophical underpinnings behind them. An example would be you don't go to a table with salads and offer, do you ask if you want pepper on it without bringing a pepper grinder? Like you don't say, well, would you like ketchup? And then, oh, I have to go back and get ketchup. Well, it's about being prepared, right? That's all it is. So I think we go through 3 a week over the course of a year. You hit all of them. It's just focusing on it over and over and over again. It is not easy, right? It's not easy. There's other restaurant groups that have blown up, to 100 locations or 500 locations. And we've got 15, or 14, soon to be 15. So, it's hard. It's hard.
And then speaking to the expectation around service, certainly our industries are similar.
Yeah.
Right. Where discretion, treating a VIP like, I won't say a normal person, but VIP as if they're someone off the street, and so off the street like they're a VIP.
Yeah.
Right. What's the tagline?
So we say we treat our regular, our new customers like they're celebrities, and a celebrity like their new customer.
Right.
That means the new customer idea is they're also a celebrity. So you're treating celebrities like celebrities. Now we try to shield them from customers and protect them, unless there are a few celebrities who want to be people coming up to the table and asking for their autograph.
Right.
And they want you to, there's some you got to know. They want you to make the effort of, oh, no, don't bother him, but then let him through anyway.
Right.
So, your C and D list, but it doesn't matter. They're all customers and you want to treat them to a great experience. If you're paying, I mean, in this day and age, for whatever it was, 30 years, we lived in a very low inflationary environment. And then since COVID, it's been a little different. People pay a lot of money and they're, for some people, it's a significant expense for them. And so, you want to make sure they're getting that value, that they are having that experience. If it's their once a year, experience at that restaurant, it better be a good one, right? They're coming to celebrate an anniversary or a birthday or what have you. So, and that is, by the way, one of the really cool things about this industry generally is that we get to be a part of so many special occasions of people's lives. Like that's one of the really cool and fulfilling things about the job.
Well, and they're not coming just for what's on the menu.
No,
They're coming for the experience.
no. I mean, the food, what I'll say, good or great food is the ante, right? You got to have very good to great food just to be in the ball game. And and one of our sayings in the company is not great, don't serve it. Um, so I'm not saying we're perfect. I mean, our business, you make more mistakes than just about any other industry.
Sure.
But you know, that's it right there. I mean, it's really making sure that they have that special occasion every time.
Yeah. Is there a favorite item that you have on the menu?
So I will say one of my favorites, and each restaurant is different, right? And they're all like children. You love them all equally.
Right.
But there's things that we have on our menus that are, the 13th best selling item or less, and they're sneaky good. And our ribs are really good. Lake perch, the lake perch special that we have on Fridays is just one of I could eat it forever. Um, there's so many. It's just hard. It's hard to pick one.
I had the prime rib for the first time
Oh yeah,
uh, on Rush Street, and a year or two ago, and it was around the holidays, and we're doing our annual, trek to the city, taking care of all of that. We stop in, and yeah, prime rib on the menu. Holy cow!
yeah,
And that just stick to your bones, just
yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
It's perfect. And the Chicago Cup, without saying. I mean, my gosh.
yep.
I shot you the picture the other night when we were at Italia, and just
That's the go-to if you're coming from out of town and you want to, you know, just make sure you're going to have a great meal. That's the recommendation.
yeah.
Yeah.
How, talk about that location, Italia, and how that came part of your portfolio.
Sure. So another Chicago restaurant industry trivia. So the owner of that property is Larry Levy. So Levy Restaurant Group, Levy, you know, uh, concessions. And so he had bought that property in the mid 80s.
Oh
Okay.
wow.
And so if you know anything about that and just, if you take the train in, the train goes right along the river there. And that area was all industrial 30 years ago, 20 years ago. He finally, he had put a deal together to develop it. The '08 recession happened. It blew up. Now he, of course, I think he'd already sold his company to Compass Group at that point in time. So he had the means to withstand it. And I'm sure he bought that property for nothing originally.
Mhm.
Um, so he's developing it again. Reaches out to us, and you know, it's still that area is still not happening yet. Uh, but we go over there to visit, and the guy who was pitching us on it. So we met with Larry, but then there was another guy who was involved with the development, and he was the one trying to sell us on it. And he told me the story years later. He goes, "I was yakking away, and your father's just staring down the river." And he's not hearing a word I said. And he's like, I must have been talking for 5 minutes before I realized I don't need to say a word. Just let him look. And so that view is spectacular. Probably the best view of Chicago from a restaurant standpoint. I mean,
Right.
there was the Signature Room up on the Hancock, and there's some other great spots, but it's a really good one. If it's not the best, it's one of them. So that really sold us on it. Although here's the real funny story. So before we open, um, I know that we're going to have a great weekday lunch. I know we're going to have a great weekday happy hour, good weekday early dinner. And then I go, but who's going there on a Saturday night? Who's going to go on a Saturday night out to there? It's off the beaten path. It's not,
Right.
it's not hard to get to, but if you're not, we're big believers that location matters so much. And
At
it
that
is,
time, there wasn't a lot of residential around there, right?
no, it was starting to come.
Yeah.
It was starting to come. And so, but of course, Saturday was our biggest night, so, what do I know? But we were I wouldn't say panicking. We were nervous before we opened that it would do the numbers that it's doing today. I mean, it will do over 30 million this year. And we were very, we believed it would do 15 to 18, you know. So Larry was convinced it would do 20, and
Okay.
now we're 50% above that number. So
Okay.
yeah,
Mission accomplished.
mission accomplished.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done. Let's talk about leadership.
Yep.
Been through COVID, been through the recession, decisions that were made during those times. Tell me about some of the hardest decisions you've had to make.
Yep.
Maybe some decisions you wish maybe you hadn't made collectively. Talk about that.
Sure. So I will say that one of the things that we did within about a year or so of me coming in was really defining our mission and purpose as a company, as well as our core values. And those really they were tough decisions, but they were easy to get to the right answers, because as long as we looked at those values in the context of the decisions that we had to make, we it was easy. And in fact, I will say for COVID, almost all the hard decisions we made were made within the first 3 weeks. We still, I mean, don't get me wrong, the hardest thing one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life was, let go 2,000 people by a Zoom call, is rough.
Right.
And I still think, what was done back then by the government was not right. I didn't think it then, and I don't think it today. But we did things for our employees then. They got severance. We did. I'll talk about the PPP in a moment.
Sure.
But we did things. We paid for their health insurance premiums. How do you put somebody out, let them go in a pandemic, and they've still got to cover their insurance, right? We still had a core group of a couple hundred people who were working in the company, maybe less than that, who are still working to do carry out and some other ancillary revenue generation things. And we were making box meals to go for our employees. If any employee said, you know what, I need 6 meals for my family today, they weren't Chicago cuts, but we were doing meals for them. And so those are the things that I'm really proud of. The PPP was something where this was because of my legal background. And this is something that I would say one of our superpowers as a company is we just figure it out. We are really good at gutting it out and getting stuff done and using brute force. And that's kind of alluding to what I said earlier about we weren't a systems company, process company. Like, we were good at brute forcing things. And in fact, that facilitator said at the time, he goes, you guys are at 150 million. He's like, you guys should have blown up $50 million ago. He's like, there's no reason you should still be alive as a company. It's a testament to your blood, sweat, and tears that you're able to do it. But he's like, you guys are an outlier, and you're hitting the edge of where being an outlier is. So bring that back. I'm an attorney. So I am following what's going on in the legislation. I'm reading the bill before it becomes a law, learning everything I can about it, talking to our banks and telling the banks, not that we had a lot of debt, but it's still, and our landlords too. I said, guys, you have to understand, the banks anyway. I'm like, you guys got bailed out, 12 years ago by the government. Said, you guys may have to be the ones bailing us out. It was going to be either them or the insurance companies. And at the time I didn't know which, but I said, you guys need to get on top of this. And I was actually explaining to our banks what was going on. And so that, one of those banks became one of the top 10 PPP lenders in the United States. I'm not going to say I take all credit for that. I'm not, but I was one of the first people to alert them to how important it was. I think because it hadn't been passed yet. So I knew everything. I learned everything I could about it. And I still remember to this day, when the portal opened and you could apply for the loans, and we had to apply for each location,
Right.
that you had to have certain information, but you didn't know how the information was going to be present it or how they wanted it. And I remember someone, in our financial department saying, well, why don't we just wait to see how the application looks before we do it? I go, it's going to be too late then. We don't know. You don't know if they'll run out of money then. We had no idea that it was going to be as big as it was. So I remember I was at home because it was at 7 p.m. at night. I had my computer fully juiced. It was plugged in. I had everything laid out around me, the information about 10 different ways. And if you remember how, you dial for concert tickets when you were younger, just hit the redial button.
Right.
That's what I was on the webpage, just refresh, refresh, refresh. All of a sudden, it's supposed to open at 7 p.m. It opens at like 6:53. I get 7 applications in before even 7 o'clock. The bank even said after the fact, said you were like number 3 in the queue. And the whole point was we became the unemployment office for the country, like the de facto unemployment office. All those businesses with PPP were just keeping people from having to file for unemployment. So that's what it was. We were able to bring people back to work for periods of time. Then we had to let them go again because of the COVID rules. But we would do things like, and I didn't think about this was one thing I didn't think about enough until we were a little bit into it, but there were people who wanted to get back to work, right? There were people who were happy to collect checks and not, do nothing, but there were people that wanted to get back to work. And so we did a vocational survey and just said, what do you know how to do? What do you want to do? And so, the restaurants are so busy and we never have time when you have to shut down to repaint or redo the floors or that sort of thing. We did a lot of internal work to the restaurants during COVID, and we were able to pay people and keep them employed, even just to do some stuff like that. So that was cool. But it's, it goes back to when you have those values defined, it made the answers to those decisions easy, even though they were hard to execute sometimes.
Well, but good for you for having that vision, right? And understanding the gravity of everything that was going on and how important. You said you had to let go 2,000 people.
Yeah. And by the way, I wasn't the only one making those decisions, but
for sure.
And there were plenty of people in that leadership that were able to point, it was our CFO who said, how do we let people go during a pandemic and not pay for their health insurance?
Right.
And as soon as he said it, it was like, of course.
Right.
Of course. So,
well, and that speaks to really the bigger picture of the decades of success that you've had is understanding the value of the people that are part of your organization.
Yeah.
And that have made you successful throughout the years and taking care of them when they needed it, when there was really nowhere else to go.
Correct.
So tip your cap to that.
Yeah. We lost a few really good people. You'll like this story that they decided they were back of the house cooks, and they left to go into the construction business because they perceived it as more stable. And I said, I don't think that word means what you think it means, but at the time it was. So yeah, we did get a lot of people back who left the industry and came back after a few years. But yeah, it was not easy. That's for sure.
You talk about hiring for hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
Can you teach it?
I think there are certain people who have a gene for it or a gene not for it, right? If you do not, and I'll use a little bit of vulgar term. If you don't get off on making other people happy and serving other people, this is not the industry for you. Like, it has to be personally fulfilling to make other people happy. If it's not, this is not your business.
So true. And in the deals that I've been closing here in my short time in aviation, I am constantly hunting and trying to make the experience the best it can be, the best overall value, right? And because it's memorable. It's not just about getting on a plane or having a good dinner. It's about the experience and everything that's attached. It's a component of what they're doing. If they're celebrating a birthday at a Gibsons location, or if they're flying somewhere for a birthday celebration, you're part of their experience, right? And to be part of that is special.
Yeah. And that brings up something. I mentioned it before that, this is an industry where we make a lot of mistakes. Okay. There's a human element to this. There's so many variabilities. The weather, right? You've got 100 people sitting outside on a patio and a downpour comes out of nowhere. And
Right.
now they're in the restaurant, but the restaurant's already full. What do you do?
Now what?
Right now, you got a lot of ticked off people, no fault of your own. But there's so many variables and we make mistakes all the time. But there, we say in our company, you can screw up the food and save it with the service. But if you screw up the service, you lose a customer forever. And we've screwed up the service. How do you recover from it? How do you make it up? How do you go above and beyond what we'll call extreme hospitality or unreasonable hospitality? There's a book I got to give credit to Will Guidera he's been doing the his speaking circuit for some time now. He worked for what's his name? Union Square Hospitality, Danny Meyer, and wrote this phenomenal book about service, which it's really about hospitality in the restaurant industry, but it's applicable to all industries. Uh, I met him not long after I read the book. He had just written it and he had been to our restaurants. And I said, I loved your book. We're making it mandatory reading for all of our general managers and executive chefs. And I said, however, when I finished it, I got angry. And he started laughing and he goes, I know why you're angry. I go, oh, really? Why? And he goes, because you wish you guys would have written it first. And I go, bingo.
Oh, yeah.
And, they've done it at the 3 Michelin star level, totally different. They've done stuff we could never do. His restaurant, he took it from, it was rated the #1 restaurant in the world when he was operating it. So we've never done anything remotely close to that. But all the principles in that are the same, that what they do and we do, which is how do you surprise customers? How do you delight them? How do you make them feel, special, even though they're, I don't know how many customers we have every year. There's got to be at least a couple million that go through our doors.
Sure.
So, just 1 million at the boathouse alone. So it is, it's hard to do, but, training and, you can teach things like you give the management and the servers, you empower them with the ability to do things for them, right? They don't have to ask.
Right.
They might have to have a manager, check a box or something, or to swipe something to make sure that they can comp something. We don't ask. If you need to comp something for a customer, go ahead. That's fine. You certainly what we'll call the bad comps, recovering from the mistakes, but also for good reasons, right? This guy comes in, this is his 10th time in the last 3 months. Buy him a drink, buy him a dessert, whatever you want.
Right.
Comp the whole meal. It's okay.
Right.
That's that shows, that people see and go, wow, that's I didn't expect that. And so then they come back.
They come back.
Yep.
And when mistakes do happen, it's how you handle them that is the difference maker, right?
Yes.
I feel a good story coming on here. Hold on.
We have a day at the Gibsons at Oak Brook. The very first year it opened, Mother's Day. The day is known forever in history as the Mother's Day Massacre.
Oh, no.
They overbooked it. They weren't ready for it. The kitchen crashed. People were on an hour plus wait. This is Mother's Day, so it's, again, special occasion day. People are ticked off. I think we ended up, this is the most extreme, I think, but I think we, through comps and gift cards, spent about 60 grand for one day of mistakes. And, as I say, we don't ever want to do that again, but if it came down to it, we would. Right. So,
Well, and that's understanding the end goal.
Right.
Right. And
Yep.
yeah, hey, it's on us. Own it, fix it.
I mean, our GMs and the chefs, they manage the business on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, quarter, annual basis. But the horizon is, what does Simon Sinek call it? The infinite game. We're expecting to be there forever. So, that's really the driver when you think about it for those decisions.
Let's go back to that consultant that came in.
Yeah.
And an outsider's perspective on the business.
Yep.
And this is right around the time that you joined, shortly
Yeah,
thereafter.
within the first year.
Okay. So you've got an year, late 2000s when you
This
came?
is 2020, 2015,
2015, okay.
2014, 15. Yeah.
14, 15. Okay. So you come in, you're the hotshot lawyer, third generation, second generation. And then on top of that, an outsider comes in to find out what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through that and the lessons that were learned, the areas that were addressed, the strengths, the weaknesses. Walk me through that entire conversation.
Yeah. So, he came in and interviewed the entire executive team. A lot of them were involved. I mean, more than half were involved in operations. We're a very operation focused company. That's where the bread and butter is. No pun intended. And so, that he talked to all of them. Again, a lot of it was, what are you seeing? What's working? What's not working? Right. And they had a long list of what was not working. Again, it was obvious to me, but I couldn't be the guy to bring that message as the new guy,
Right.
especially the son of the
Right.
CEO at the time, right?
That's a hard
And
spot to
so,
be in,
right,
for sure.
right.
Yeah.
You guys don't know what you're doing. No, and here's the thing: the message I tried to bring over the last since I've been there, how they operated the business was the right way at that time, at that size.
Obviously.
Right? And so the things that were done were not, it wasn't to belittle them or say they were doing it wrong. It was just, no, we have to learn how to evolve and change.
Adapt.
And adapt. Exactly right.
Right.
So they were the right people at the right time. They did the right things, but at some point those things don't work anymore.
Right.
Or some of it does. We'd never want to lose that idea of, that level of hospitality that we want to give. But the way we did it, the way we trained people on it was, well, just work next to me, and in 5 years you'll get it, and you can be the guy next, for the next
Right.
restaurant. Well, that doesn't work when you get to a certain size. It takes too long. It's possible, but you're going to open up one restaurant every 3, 4, 5 years, not, so, not that we've done much better than that. So, so yeah, that it was, it was interesting. Did they really buy in? I don't think so. Did I mean, of the 10 or so people of the leadership team, there's 4 left, maybe. One of whom's my father, and I don't think he's ever truly bought in. I mean, when I first came into the business, he was like, "You gotta be on every little detail, and, when a pipe bursts, you gotta be there." And I looked at him and I said, "If that's true, we're screwed." I didn't use the word screwed, because, that doesn't work. You can't have a business the size we have and be on top of every little detail. Now, it doesn't mean you don't paying attention to the details isn't part of the job and part of the culture, but I can't be the one doing every single
Right.
one. And he was the guy who did every single one, and it was tearing him apart inside and insane, making him insane.
And you can get away with it with one location.
Sure. And then the second location happened to be next door. So it was really still one location.
Right.
It wasn't until I think the business was 10 years old before they had their first location away from the mothership,
Okay.
so to speak,
Yeah.
in Rosemont. So,
Mhm.
and I will credit my dad with a lot of things. He made it a point not to go there. He made it a point to not, we grew up in Park Ridge, so it was a 5 minutes from our house. He made it a point to not that he never went there, but he could have been there every night.
Right.
On the way home, just stop in, and he made it a point not to make sure that it could survive without him being there.
Smart.
Yeah.
So, what is the one idea or initiative or concept that came out of that conversation that was embraced?
Oh, that's a really good question. Hmm. The idea that we had to have processes and systems and start building them. Like I said, I don't think everybody bought into that, but um, we got there eventually. So I think intellectually, people were buying in, but emotionally they weren't, because that's, it's no different than we talk about, it's very rare to have a CEO who can be the founder up through to being a let's say $1 billion company. Usually
Right.
there's, I don't know where my ceiling is, but I'm sure it's somewhere.
Right.
And you know, that idea that they weren't, they were the right guys at the right time.
Right.
So
Right. And with that, what is in place now? What are you working on now? So the back end was fixed when you first started, right? With some help.
it took years to
Yeah.
fix it.
Right.
It
Yeah.
took years. And I wouldn't say it's totally fixed. We're in a much better spot than we were before. There's always going to be things that, our CFO who only retired, let's see, 2.5 years ago at the young age of 81, there were all sorts of things that we couldn't do until he was gone. And it was mostly technological, right? Updating the new, uh, ERP system, new inventory management, all these things that we had put off because, again, he wasn't going to, again, nothing wrong with how he did things. It was
No.
just, we had to go to the
Understood.
next level.
Understood.
Right.
Yeah.
So still working on stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
But in a lot better place than we were.
So what are you working on now?
So, our primary focus has been the new restaurant, Gibsons Tavern. We're still fine tuning the menu. Construction is moving along. Like I said, we're about 4 or 5 months away. So very excited about that project. We just signed a lease for a Gibsons in Nashville.
Congratulations.
So very excited about that. It is a couple blocks off of Broadway.
Okay.
And
what's the concept there?
it will be a traditional Gibsons.
Oh, great.
Traditional Gibsons. So very excited about that. Just starting to meet with the architects, designers to start mapping that out in the next couple weeks. So
Okay.
very,
Wonderful.
very exciting. And then we've got a lot of other irons in the fire that we're working on. None of them are definitive, but we're trying, in some of those markets that I mentioned before.
It makes sense
to
with the
find
equity
stock.
that you
Yeah.
have, for sure. For sure. Tell me more about the tavern concept.
So the tavern concept, I'm going to tell you a story about it. All of it's not true. Um,
Love those
about
stories. Yeah.
no, so not that we didn't know this before, but Disney, we've learned a lot from a lot of the partners we've had. Disney's
bet.
one of them.
Yeah.
Everything at Disney has a story behind it, a backstory. And so we created a backstory for this restaurant. The backstory is we're opening up on Fulton Market, right? It's Fulton and Sangamon is the corner. Fulton Market is the traditional, food distribution center of Chicago, like the meatpacking district in New York. You only have to go back 10 years and there were still some of those distributors still there. So the idea is this restaurant is the precursor to Gibson's or the prequel to Gibson's. It was opened by a couple who the husband was a Teamster. The wife happened to be a good cook. They lived upstairs in the building and she opened up a little restaurant that fed all the Teamsters and the other people that worked in the distribution warehouses along the street. And her food was good. And you'll see the restaurant, the way it's designed is there's multiple rooms and segments to look like it had been opened up over a course of years that they added on here and there. And so it's got this kind of traditional working man's vibe to it, especially in the original bar. And then as you get to the dining room, which would have been added later, it's more elegant. So the bar restaurant will have a classic tavern menu. It will be comfort food and, there'll be burgers, there'll be a couple steaks on the menu, but kind of a little bit lower check average than what you see at Gibson's. Not much lower, but lower. Still fine dining, still service, but no tablecloth in the bar area and that sort of thing. Whereas then you go into the dining room, and there's multiple rooms, but the dining room itself will be much more elegant cart service style, where waiters teams with captains and, they'll be preparing tableside presentations of some of the menu items, a much tighter menu, much more expensive menu than the rest of the restaurant. So that's the idea. And then, you'll see some of the items on the menu will be, as I said, it's the prequel or precursor to Gibson. So there'll be some familiar items on it, but there'll be other differentiated components too, things that are, that aren't on our menus at the other
Right.
locations. So
And when is that coming online?
October, November, we'll see.
Somewhere in there?
Somewhere in that time frame.
Okay.
Yeah.
Won't hold you to it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
Construction's moving along,
Okay.
which is good. But you never know. We've had restaurants that have opened up on time and most haven't.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay, so some great stuff so far. Want to talk about where we go from here, where you want to take the brand. Is there an option, for example, behind me?
Mhm.
Are you thinking about
Gibson's Airlines?
No. Well, no, but but supporting what we do, right?
Yeah.
And having a VIP type of catering option that we
Yeah.
can tap into.
So a couple things. So first, our very first airplane catering experience, we got a call. This is probably in the very early days of the restaurant, early 90s.
Okay.
And the receptionist takes it. She's the only person there. She's a hostess, but she's the only person there with a couple of opening people. It's, early in the morning. And it turns out it's Jack Nicholson. And he wants to place an order to take to the his plane. I don't know if he was flying out of O'Hare or if he was out of here. He was flying private somewhere.
Right.
And so, she could have just said, no, we're not open. But she said, of course. And, had the chef make up a couple things that whatever he ordered. And she personally drove it out to the airport and dropped it off. And so anytime he came into town after that, he would call her up and
Oh,
she would
that's
make sure
great.
he was taken care of. So it's that concierge level of hospitality, which we preach. So, one of the things that we are trying to do, we do catering, although not a ton of it right now because we don't have the infrastructure for it. We've done some big events. We've done the BMW Championship
Mhm.
when it was here at Medina and at Conway Farms, where we did these big tents and uh, huge catered event. We've done some offsite weddings for some of our investors and things of that nature. But we are in the process of working through the business plan right now to build that catering commissary kitchen
Okay.
for our business because I think there is a lot of business for it for us to do, and we do it well. We do it very well. But Gibson's Rosemont is a short 15, 20 minutes away. If you are on your way to the airport here,
Right.
and you want to stop by with a takeout order, there's lots of food that travels well. Great to take with you and to eat on the plane. So the filet sliders, the hamburger, steak if you want to be cutting with a fork and a knife on a plane.
Well, you can
All of it.
there's a way that you can carve up the Chicago cut to make
Yep.
it shareable.
Yep.
Certainly,
Mhm.
that's been known to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you divulge what did Nicholson order? Do we know?
I'm sure someone knows this. I was probably in college at the
Oh,
time or high school, and so I have no recollection whatsoever. Someone somewhere knows.
Someone knows. But you know, having the vision and the approach to that, where easily, to your point, the answer could have said, "No, I'm sorry, we can't do that."
Yeah.
That's
Right.
the easy answer.
Right. So,
And in our industry, how important that is to say, "Let me see if we can,"
yep.
or
Right.
better yet, we can do that. Right?
Answer is yes. Now what's the question?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I didn't I talked about it. I didn't describe what it was. Our, core purpose for being is every customer must leave happy. And we use the word customer instead of guest intentionally because we believe that the customer has a higher expectation than a guest. Because if you're just a guest at someone's house and the food's not that great, you're still going to go back to that person's house. Whereas if you're paying for it, the expectation is higher. So we use customer very intentionally. But the idea of, I go back to that purpose and personal fulfillment of whether it is sharing those holidays and special occasions with people, of being that place where people can come and celebrate and be happy. And frankly, not even oftentimes not celebrate. I mean, the amount of, funerals that we host at our restaurants, they're remembrances, right?
Right.
We've got some of those special moments of people's lives. And if the point is to do that for as many people as possible, well, then expansion makes a lot of sense. Growing makes a lot of sense.
Right.
The money will follow. It's not about the money if you're doing it for something for a greater purpose. So, and as I mentioned before, not that we can't open more restaurants in the Chicago area, it just is harder to do in a lot of respects because we have to come up with new concepts. And we have concepts that are great. The Gibsons brand itself is a very well-known brand. So why not use it and bring the gospel of Gibsons to other cities?
Amen.
Amen.
Talk about then as you retire as CEO in your early 80s,
Sure.
what would have happened between now and then that you would say, yes, that made a lot of sense. I'm very proud of what we accomplished in that 25 years.
Yeah.
No.
So, I mean, I told my father this when I came in. I said, if your goal is to just have somebody to come in and maintain and do what we've always done, I said, I'm not necessarily the right person for that. It's just not that I couldn't do it. It's just I think you there are other people that could do it just as well without, and you wouldn't necessarily have to pay them a ton of money. There's a legacy here that we want to preserve, but also expand. And so, it's not about there's you can't have the CEO role and also, there's some defense you have to play, but you can't only play defense. You have to play offense. And the fun part is playing offense, frankly, right? That's the enjoyable part of the job. And so, you know, growing is not just for the sake of growing, but it's to provide opportunities for the people who work for you, right?
Right.
If you're not growing, you've got people who've worked for you for 3, 4, 5 years, and then what's next for me? Well, I got to wait till this person retires or passes away or quits before I can move up. So that's one piece of it. And the other is what I mentioned before, which is really how do bring this concierge level of service and make more people happy? That's what it's all about. So.
Can you circle back to the restraining orders
Oh, the
story?
restraining order story. Okay, so this is a good one. So there's a guy. He's not the president, the managing partner of one of the top law firms in Chicago, and he has, in the first year or so of the company, he's been eating at the restaurant semi frequently. Every 2, 3, 4 weeks or so. He's gotten to know the hostess. He's divorced and he goes on a first date with a woman who is going to be ultimately ends up being his wife. It's their first date and he shows up at the restaurant. The restaurant's not been crazy busy, so he didn't think he needed a reservation. Big conventions in town. I don't know if it's the hardware show or the restaurant show, but one of those, 50,000 person shows is in town and it's just wall to wall people. And you know, I'll come back another time. My father's like, no, 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 you're not. That's not how we work. You're a local. You're a regular. We're going to take care of you.
Right.
So he runs up to the office. The story is, he literally took his hand and just wiped the whole, all the office supplies were on the desk, dumped it, grabbed the table, runs downstairs, throws a tablecloth on it, finds a little spot in the restaurant, and so they go in and then they seat them. Well, so they're having dinner, but this table behind them has a bunch of conventioneers that are, they're 3 sheets to the wind. They're laughing, they're loud, swearing a ton. And the guy who's directly behind him keeps laughing and throwing his chair back and bumping right into this guy. And so, he asked the guy if they could, calm down or, be careful. And, it escalates and pretty soon they're in each other's faces, pointing fingers in each other's chests, and it's about to break out into a fight. And this guy wisely realizes, okay, this is going to be in the newspaper tomorrow. If the managing partner of this big firm is, I may lose my law license type thing. So he backs down and just to his date, you know what, we're getting out of here. And they get up and leave. And they try to chase him down and he's not having any of it. He's just pissed off. And so he leaves the restaurant. My father does everything he can to try to make amends with this guy. He will not listen. He will not, hear my father out. He calls him at the office. won't take his call. He finds out that the guy's favorite dessert is cherry pie, so he hand delivers a cherry pie to the office of this law firm. Uh, Nothing. Gets to the point where the secretary says, "You know what? My boss said if you keep harassing me, he is going to file a restraining order against you and to leave him alone." So fast forward, one of my father's friends, it turns out, is a big client of this firm. He finds this out. He said, "You know what? You need to run interference and try to make this thing happen." I just tell him I'll have him over for dinner. Um, if after that, if he never wants to see me again, so
Right.
be it. Uh, the guy threatened to pull his business from the firm
Oh, is
to
that
make
right?
it happen. Yep.
Oh, wow.
And so finally, the managing partner of this firm has dinner with my father and this other guy. And my father, over the course of an hour and a half, wins him over. And he would spend, between him personally and the law firm, they would have closing dinners and other events there. They would spend 100 grand a year at the firm. That back when that was, that's probably 250 or 300 in today's
Right.
dollars. So, yes, some people call it the cherry pie story. We ended up naming so the guy's first name was Jerry, so it became Jerry's Cherry Pie uh, on the menu. But yes, I like to call it the restraining order story because, you know, and that's the level that we will go to try to make it right. So, yeah.
Fantastic.